bouffant all the time. It really is quite. Well, yeah, Ivan most certainly does, doesn't he? He is one of those that spends a lot of time in front of the mirror. That's Ivan Harrison, by the way. That's who we're talking about. Ivan, hello. Anyway, welcome everybody to Brainfood Live On Air. It is episode 68. We are bringing it to you like we do every Friday. So welcome everybody to the show. We've got an amazing topic to discuss today, and one I think everybody in our business is going to be interested in: how to be a great interviewer, how to ask great interview questions, and in fact, what are great interview questions? We've got to get beyond the tell me about yourself style opener that we're still getting, job seekers, tell me if I'm wrong. If you're going to an interview, are you still getting the tell me about yourself as the guy reads your CV for the first time, having not prepared? That's the classic experience, isn't it? Anyway, just a quick sound check, folks. As we always do, just a bit of housekeeping, really. Everybody in Crowdcast, can you just say hello? Just make sure you can hear me okay. Just put it in the chat stream there. Let me know that's fine. For the people who are watching in the Facebook group, got 3,000 members there. So hello, all the folks in Facebook. If you're watching this and you can hear me also, just comment quickly into the chat stream there and say, I can hear you. Please continue. And finally, I think LinkedIn Live, that should be live. I can't even see it. I don't have two screens, but I can take a message. So if you're watching this on LinkedIn Live, please do comment and say, I can hear you. Just get on with the damn show. Anyway, I can see AV is working fine. Quick word for our sponsors this week. Our sponsors are CVCheck. They are an amazing referencing checking tool. 300,000 checks they conducted last year. Over 22,000 businesses use them, predominantly in Australia and in New Zealand, but moving into other markets, into especially UK and EMEA also. Integrated with ATS, HRIS, all the rest of that stuff. We absolutely need to get better at validating people in the COVID era, because we've lost the face-to-face interaction. And I think referencing checking is definitely one of those things that we all need to pay attention to. So I'm going to share a link to the company CVCheck. Go please check them out. And they are helping us put shows like this together. Okay, on to it. As ever, we have a co-host. It's Adam Gordon. Adam Gordon with new shirt. I mentioned this before. I'm impressed by what you're wearing. The texture's good, color's good. Great, mate. Is it old or new? You buy it?
It's old, but it's my commitment to diversity on the show, because last week several people commented that you and I were wearing exactly the same clothes. So I thought, I'm not going to turn up with a white shirt this week. Going to mix it up.
What? That's great. I feel like I'm obliged to wear this now because everyone's used to it. And I just wonder whether you'd be okay, folks, if I wore something different. I don't know. I mean, I just feel like, you might be expecting him to wear a white shirt. So I'm wearing a white shirt. But if you want me to wear something different, I do have other clothing. I can put something else on. So let me know in the comments. Okay. We begin as always, Adam. Recruiting Brainfood newsletter. Did you read it last week? And if you did, what was interesting, man?
Yeah. So the first thing which I really, really found interesting was a sort of composite of people's thoughts around working from home with your other half. So you get to see what your husband, wife, girlfriend, whatever it is, what they're like in work mode. And I thought that was really interesting. One thing that I find actually very challenging personally is to go from being in work mode to then going and taking my kids for a couple of hours and then back into work mode, because you talk in an entirely different way. Your brain just changes complete gears. I mean, One's not more tough than the other. They're both tough in different ways. But actually, that got me thinking about that. About actually, that's a really, really difficult transition. I think for a lot of people, it'll be a difficult transition to go from being in work mode to go to being like in a relationship mode with your partner. But to be honest, my wife and I talk to each other in exactly the same way anyway, so it doesn't make any difference at all. But for a lot of people, I can imagine that it's especially if your partner is not in your industry or does not do anything that relates to what you do, that can be mentally very, very challenging.
Yep. I think that's a really important point. And, I'm a big evangelist of remote working, but I've got a very simple kind of domestic life. Whereas other people have, kids, they've got partners, they've got all kinds of things going on in the background. And as you say, they're different conversations, different parts of your brain that you're using. So the work from home experience is totally different when you have to juggle all of that. I spoke to a friend of mine actually just last week, and I can't speak to him unless everyone else in his house has gone to bed. And that's because psychologically he can't context switch. Because he's got young kids, his wife is there as well. It's like, not a massive house, etc. So he can't actually context switch into the sort of conversations we have because, there's stuff, there's other parts and other conversations he needs to have, and that happenstance. So really interesting, I think very challenging, maybe has big implications actually as to how we do remote working. And in fact, whether we factor in your domestic circumstances as relevant to your suitability for remote work, because we haven't set ourselves up for it. We haven't got a home office. I don't know about you, but most people haven't got an office where, lock is on, kids can't come in, you're in the sofa, you're on the kitchen table. That's how we've done it. So we don't have these spaces to focus. So yeah, very interesting. LinkedIn actually did a very good collection there where they basically said, have you seen your your partner in work mode? And what did they tell you? What did that tell you? And yeah, some interesting stories come out from that for sure. Worth a read. Shared it in the chat stream. Okay, what else, man?
A rec-to-rec business in Australia produced a billings report based on interviewing, I think, 180 recruiters. I found it very interesting. Huge drop between March and April. Continued low billings in May, and then a peak up again, or certainly upward trend again in June across all different business sectors. And I found that very interesting. One thing I've got as a general perception about recruitment agency billings is, if I look at the company that I trained with, I'm absolutely sure that the average recruitment consultant bills less than I did when I started 20 years ago. I listen to this is big companies. I listen to the kind of billings you get in companies like Hayes and businesses like that, and I'm thinking, they've got a lot more people, but each individual's billing a lot less than they were 20 years ago, I think. But anyway, certainly was interesting to look at.
I thought the number was quite stable. I mean, it's been like 15, 20 years since I've been an agency recruiter, so I actually have no idea what is the average billing. But back in my day, if you were like a operational contributor, you'd have a target from 150 to 200K a year perm billing, something like that, and like 2 deals a month, basically. Yeah. So is that now the normal? Is that low compared to what it is now? Do people need to bill higher? I'd love to hear your comments. If you're an agency recruiter, by the way, let us know what is a good number. Does 200 make target these days? I don't know. I mean, but yeah, I think the Aussie numbers might be a little bit different as well, because obviously it's priced in different currency and all the rest of it. So didn't quite understand where that was.
There you go. Luke's just said what I was about to say. That it's Luke says I think for a perm consultant target's about 120,000 a year now. Now, I was going to say it's not unusual for recruiters to have a target that's beneath 10 grand a month. But certainly, I mean, I wouldn't have got fired at 10 grand a month 20 years ago, but I definitely wouldn't have been, I'd have been certainly bottom half at 10 grand a month.
Yeah, you'd be exposed. You'd be exposed as a must do better for sure.
I'd have been doing about 14. I'd have been doing about 14, 15 a month, something like that. And I was probably about average, I guess, in billings.
You know what? That's really interesting. This is part of the reason why I was impressed by Ez Khan. He's the guy that did the report, by the way, which I'll share in the chat stream a bit later. I was interested in this because it strikes me that the industry in general, the agency industry in general, could really do with like a global survey of similar type, anonymized. Let's just be honest. Let's see where the billings numbers are. And I'm going to see if I can get actually the questionnaire from Ez, and maybe I can distribute it to the Brainfooders and say, if you're an agency person, please fill this in, and then see whether we can plot a similar type of graph. Probably, the pattern will be the same. Things trucking along until March, maybe, then a big collapse, April, May, and then a little bit of a pickup. I think APAC generally have probably coped with the pandemic a lot better, I would say, than many other places in the world, which typically means you can open up again a little bit quicker, even though I know Melbourne's had to shut down once more. But it means that, they can get back to normal, quote unquote, a lot more efficiently than other places. But anyway, it looks like a bit of a bum, and I know some of my Aussie friends are quite optimistic about what that looks like. Anyway, what else?
Glenn said he reckons most pretty good recruiters are looking at 25,000 a month, and that's a hugely higher number than what Luke said. But I think he's talking about temp contract billings there. But I'd be interested to know one just additional element to this is when I started as a recruitment consultant in 1999, I mean, an average recruitment consultant was making a lot of money. So I really wonder if recruitment consultants are actually making less money than they used to, or I mean, they'll be making a lot more if it's like Glenn and they're 25,000 a month. But it would be great to find out.
Yeah, I reckon the numbers probably haven't shifted. Either the fees, the rates, the commissions. I think this has probably been quite stable. Again, I'd love to actually track it, like have the percentage that a recruiter gets from their employer. Has that actually gone down overall over the years? I'm not sure. But yeah, I think fees have definitely gone down because there's been massive more fragmentation of the agency marketplace, isn't there? It's much easier to step out as an experienced recruiter yourself and say, right, I'm going to sell back into my customers and just undercut. So that's going to have a deflationary effect on the fees. And maybe that has a cascade effect somewhere down the line. Maybe that ultimately might affect the numbers that you're talking about. Anyway, this could be a good topic for the show, actually. So I'll make a note of that. This is a really good one. Yeah, billings on agencies for sure. Okay, one more, mate.
Maybe you could get the $1 billion recruiter on, and he could talk to us about it.
And that is,
I can't remember his name, but he's a trainer, and he's called the billion. No, he's called the. I think he's called the. Yeah, no, I think he might be the $1 billion recruiter or something like that. Anyway, we could get him on.
Yeah.
Okay, another one. So I'm a sourcer, and I've done a lot of sourcing, and I still really enjoy sourcing. And I think sourcing is not just good for recruitment; it's life hacks and it's life skills.
Right.
Yeah, you want to find the best pizza menu in Glasgow. You know how to do it if you're a sourcer.
You would source for that, yeah.
Exactly. One thing I really enjoy is reverse image searching. And I've always found Google to be reasonably useful for that, especially when you get Mike Wormsley, Andy. That's the guy. You have to say Mike Wormsley, the $1 billion recruiter. But reverse image searching, I think that it's really, really easy to spot fake profiles. So somebody sends you a Facebook friend request. You're like, nah, you don't want to be my friend. I don't know what you want to do, but you don't want to be my friend. You reverse image search that, and you find that it's a stolen image. Same on LinkedIn, more recently as well. But it turns out that there's another business called Yandex, which is doing it better than Google. And I think it was Bellingcat that has informed everybody about this, and well worth looking at. I had a quick look at Yandex. Looks authentic, and reverse image search, great technique.
Yandex is one of the biggest search engines on the planet. It's basically Russia's version of Google, essentially, but it's completely self-built. And according to Irina Shemaeva, who is obviously Brainfood is a big fan of Irina, she's actually a Russian, and she's got a lot of great contacts still there, and she has a lot of know-how as to how the tech ecosystem works over there. And And yeah, she uses Yandex ahead of anything else for reverse image search, because basically facial recognition is a stronger aspect there. So Bellingcat, for the folks who don't know, essentially are an online investigation bureau, really started by some guy looking at YouTube videos, trying to verify whether chemical weapons were kind of used in the Syrian civil war. And he actually did prove it purely by looking at public data on YouTube, such as this forensic analysis of all of the things that were going on public information. And it's still, I think, a really probably quite technical, but it's super interesting site to bear in mind, particularly if you are a sourcer or someone who's doing some leads capture, or going deep into trying to find information or find candidates. Anyhow, cool.
One more, which cool. I'd like to, and this is going to. So you were on TA Pod, and
yes,
you were talking about COVID having killed the need for culture fit. Culture fit we've talked about before as being something that's a slightly dodgy sort of way of assessing somebody's suitability to work in your organization, because it's potentially contradictory to the concept of a diverse workforce. But I didn't listen to the pod, but I'm really interested just to know what you meant by that, because I think I probably agree.
I was quoted out of context, no, I did say it, but it was more a case of, look, when you're working in remote, what I think is going to happen is that we're going to do less full-time hiring remote. It makes more sense, I think, to take people on a project type basis, because you don't have to, make that commitment either side. Neither the individual nor the employer needs to make that massive commitment. Oh, let's sign a permanent full-time contract. It's going to be, I think, a series of projects that you'll compensate the worker for. In that context, I think cultural fit actually recedes away out of relevance. You're not going to be seeing this person every day. You're not going to be talking to them every day. I actually kind of prefer working in that way, probably because I'm a big misanthrope. It's like, we just need the delivery of this. Here's what we should deliver. So yeah, I think it will eventually erode it. I think the shift to remote is going to have a lot of second order effects that we can't yet see, but we'll start seeing in the next several months or so, as we kind of make that move permanently there.
What do you think about values? Do you think that the need to hire on values also erodes as a result of the kind of geographic dispersity of the workforce?
I think the cool answer is no, but I think the practical answer is going to be yeah. A lot of the cultural, all of the intangible things that we use to assess people are massively important because of the physical proximity of it. If you are sitting in the same room with people, then of course you need to have alignment in many different areas outside of the functional specific bit of work that you need for that to be done. This is the reason for interviewing in the first place, and we'll talk about that topic. In my view, interviewing face-to-face has always been a ritual. We pretend it's about trying to assess functional competence, but really it's a sniff test, as Seth Godin once said. It's basically me looking at you, you looking at me, and saying, okay, can we work together at this visceral level? There's no real rationality behind it, but that situation may never occur. It could well be you'll end up interacting with people where you've got no relationship. There's one of the people I work with, one of Brainfood's most important contributors. I've never spoken to her. Never seen her. I've only emailed her. But she's absolutely amazing, consistently delivers what I need her to deliver week after week after week after week for 4 years. She's brilliant. Never let her go. But you cannot say that there has been a cultural fit conversation. There's never been a conversation. So I think we're moving very quickly into a different way of organizing human work. And the idea of a company, doing it in a company, may also recede in future. Anyway, all of this is relevant to our chat because we are going to talk about how do you interview in a more sophisticated and advanced way, because there is a context where you do want to hire people into your business. Now, there are companies that are committed to this in any case, but also I think when you're hiring people or working with people that are going to be intimate partners to your company, I think that's where you do need that cultural fit and connection. If you're setting up a business, you got a fellow founder you want to qualify. Of course, you don't do that without deep and intense conversation. So what I want to do is to bring on Charlotte, who is a great contributor. She's an operational recruiter, by the way. In fact, I'll let her introduce herself. But she's so smart, and she's got some really interesting background in behavioral science that I want to tap into because it's quite an unusual background for a recruiter. And I wonder whether we could kind of get the combination of those two qualities and see how we can improve our interview game. Because again, I think, this is a trainable skill, and we've got away with a lot of this, hey, there she is.
Hi, everyone.
How are you, Charlotte?
I am good. How are you?
Very good. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Charlotte, for the people who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself and who you are and what do you do?
Yes, of course. So I am originally a behavioral scientist, and I currently work in a crypto company, fintech, as a senior TA, doing lots of projects in addition to recruiting itself, mostly leadership roles all around the world, 7 different countries. That's it.
That is it. And you know what? You're already more interesting than 99% of the guests that we've had on here, because you've gone and, studied something really interesting. And, most people, I think it's super interesting to understand human behavior, basically. So I'll be interested to find out a bit more about you from there. Adam, you saying something?
Tell us about your accent, Charlotte.
What do you think where I'm from?
Do you know something? I'm pretty sure you're Dutch, but you've got...
Don't say Irish. Don't say Irish.
Sorry, you took the words right out of my mouth. How much?
I lived in Dublin.
Either Dublin or Boston.
I lived in Dublin. Right? It's 10 years ago. 10 years. Yeah. Can you imagine? It still has an effect on me.
That's a very good ear because I'm starting to hear the Irish twang now. But absolutely, you have a bit of that. Okay, so Charlotte, listen. Purpose of this was talking about interview. How do we get better in interviewing? And what are great interview questions? Are there any foundational principles that you think recruiters are missing when it comes down to interviewing candidates?
I think asking yourself the question, why am I actually asking this question, should be implemented in everything that you do, rather just than have a list and go like, okay, I need to, screen for these requirements or cultural fit, for example, like principles like teamwork, etc. Why am I actually asking this? Why do I want to achieve a certain answer? And what kind of answers do I want? What are the negative answers? What are the positive answers that can contribute to the final decision that we end up making?
So do you think that basically recruiters end up just like mechanically just checking off a list, which of course we do, don't we? Because we have a form. We literally have a form to fill oftentimes. Do you remember the interview sheet? I don't know whether these things still exist. It's a structured thing. It's like to guide you to ask these questions. Make sure it's filled in. Otherwise, you haven't screened this person properly. You're saying that's wrong.
I'm saying it's not wrong or right, but people should think about more the reason why they're doing this. And I think as a recruiter, you should have a natural curiosity towards the human aspect. Like, why are people behaving? Why did that person achieve that goal? Why is he a CEO right now? What influenced during his experience and his career that he is at this point in his career where he is now? I think it's such a way of thinking that everyone should implement in their assessing or interviewing.
Yeah,
sounds very vague, probably.
No, I think curiosity is also something you can cultivate, isn't it? It's like why we should be teaching arts and why we should be getting kids out to, running around in the forest a bit or whatever. It's to try and just cultivate this idea of investigation. And when I was doing the job of agency recruiter, I was actually I forced myself to be interested, actually. Because sometimes you're interviewing people that, on the surface aren't doing particularly interesting jobs, let's say, you know, they were IT support or they were systems engineer or something like this. Not to say that's not interesting, folks, but I forced myself to get into it. You know, it's like...
But you kept on being motivated, so there should have been a different positive reinforcement for you in order to get going, which is probably money, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. I think it's that was the difference. It was very clear. Okay.
Sorry.
So
being Dutch, sorry.
Quite right, Stefan. I think systems engineering, I've now discovered it to be cool. So before the systems engineers come in and like destroy my LinkedIn, let me just say it's totally cool. But when I first encountered it, I thought, oh my goodness, why is this interesting? But you can get interested in the job, can't you? Rather than just accept that it's mundane. It's not. There's lots of interesting sort of angles and nuances to almost what everyone does.
100%. I think like when you accept a job, you think of the positive motivations, like I'm taking this job because I get to learn, because I get to grow, because I make good money and I'm being challenged. Some people like less of a challenge, so they're more interested in a mediator role where they can just do their job. And you will be also able to assess that during the interview, that people just want to do their job and nothing more, or you need more performance people who are constantly challenging yourself. So if you ask questions, for example, what have you done in the last 2 months in order to learn and to grow? The person comes up with, well, I did some courses, but what else? What out of the box? Keep on probing. You'll get to learn a lot that's beneath the surface with regards to their behavior.
So this is actually, this is actually a technique of interviewing, isn't it? Where what's it called? Where sort of you ask one question and then you kind of. Sorry, Adam, what did you say?
I said the 5 whys. So whatever somebody says, why is that? Why is that? Why is that? And then what you end up with is actually the truth, and what you started with is not actually important.
Oh,
yeah.
So go on.
You don't give the person the space to kind of think about it for 5 minutes. It's literally asking why, and then you end up having a truthful story behind it because you can't think differently. That's where the genuinity comes up.
So this is quite interesting. You're saying that this why technique is a way of uncovering the truth. So if you have a doubt or it's unclear as to what occurred, then actually you could employ this technique, and this is where it would surface out the right answer. Not to say the person is deliberately lying, but they may be, not presenting the absolute truth in a very clear way.
Well, I think it's like, getting people off guard, catching them off guard, basically, not being able to prepare, for example, saying like, why do you think you need to have this job? The question that a lot of people ask, that people prepare for. And when you ask the why and why and why, they're not able to, prepare for 5 different questions that are go quite deep. So you get the truthful answer. It's called probing, 5 whys or probing, it's called.
Is that actually a formal technique?
Yeah, probing is a formal technique. Yeah.
It's about identifying motivation is a really important aspect to this. So when you ask somebody why are you interested in this job, and they say, I think it'd be great to work for PepsiCo. When you ask them 5 times why, what you actually get is because I want 20% pay rise. Right? So it's about really understanding somebody's motivation.
Yeah. And I think also with regards to, for example, asking a person how he accomplished a certain project or how do you do that, it will be all from the, STAR method. This is how I did it, blah, blah. But there are also mediators which influence directly their path to success. So it could be that you have an amazing team. It could be because, the CEO supported you wherever. So there are different mediators all surrounding that are environmental that have influence in you succeeding in specific role.
So this is actually really interesting, isn't it? Because we're all working in a collaborative way. Like, how do we isolate the individual contributor when, legitimately, I'm a software engineer. Guess what? I'm in a team of like 20 guys, or 20 people who are building this piece of software, this module. And I'm taking claim for it, right? Obviously, I'm saying, yeah, of course, I wrote the most important things. Like, how do you isolate that from the other people? And you're saying there's a way to do that using another framework?
Well, it's behavioral scientist term. So you have moderators, which is basically the cause from variable A to the outcome, which is a direct linear relationship. And you have mediators influencing the moderator that gets the eventual outcome. So it has to do with positive environment. It could be anything. It could be your day-to-day business. You're tired, you didn't sleep right. Your children kept you awake, and because of that, you didn't have the result that you wanted to achieve. It could be anything, basically any factors that's environmental. It could be that someone's ill in your family, and so on. And I think an interesting topic with regards to that is also resilience, which is something, if you have a high demanding job or you're able to do that, I do assess for resilience within leadership, because they need to have a certain base that they can actually don't take no for an answer and continue doing their job.
I'm going to go back to the resilience point, but I want to just drill down on this one thing right now, because I don't want to let it go. And this is about I had a really interesting, a good memory of a guy who pitched a product of assessing candidates. Really great product. I forget the name of it. But the data that he sort of uncovered had this insight, which was the people that performed best weren't the individuals that walked around with an objective level of academic achievement or career achievement or whatever it is. He said the people that perform best are the ones that performed the best in advance of the local competition that they had. So in other words, if you had a student that was getting straight A's, that's all well and good, but if he or she is in a school where everyone is getting straight A's, suddenly that becomes a non-indicator as to whether that person is going to be a success in this particular thing. However, if you found a student that was getting C, but everyone around that student was getting D, E, and F, that person is likely to be a high achiever because they're able to overcome the kind of the environment, as you were talking about, the mediating influences. They were able to overcome that, still achieve and still deliver. And it was super interesting insight,
So basically, it's resilience. So, for example, if you experience certain things that you need to overcome in your life, if I take an example for me, both my parents had cancer. It was a hard time, but I dealt with it in such a way because I had a positive outlook. And because of that, I can tackle certain issues now in my life that seem challenging, but not as challenging because I've already experienced something that was most challenging, well, at least until now in my life. So it's an attitude towards certain tasks that people ask you to do that are just not, you can't compare them with what you've experienced before. So the A student, he has the theory, he has the mind, but still you need to put it into practice. And if you're not able to do that and not have any experience, for example, you bumped your elbow and it hurts, you can moan and sit on a chair and moan about your elbow, or you could change it into something like, I can actually, get over this and look farther and just act upon it. It's a different attitude, it's a different way of thinking, and a more positive outlook.
Well, would you say that, so this is actually, I think I would agree with you, Charlotte, but this would also mean that people who are simply having longer in life, like more life experience, are likely to have better answers because they've got that experience to be able to say something. Whereas, someone who is younger, literally 18, 17 or whatever, they haven't had those experiences. Like, how do we surface that information up?
I think it's all about asking them questions with regards to imaginary projects. Imagine you would be put in charge of this project where you need to execute A, B, and C. How would you approach this? It's more like a competency/behavioral interview. So you could see their way of thinking, understand how they would act upon something like that.
Yeah, so now it's like scenario planning, isn't it?
Exactly,
it is. Put yourself in. And by the way, a lot of people might criticize this idea because you say, oh, this person hasn't done it. But actually, scenario planning is turning into something that a lot of people who are doing L&D are really kind of using very extensively. So, for instance, during the COVID period, obviously we're still in it. You can't go in and do training. Lots of people are doing scenario planning in order to kind of build the muscle memory of how it all works, so that when they do encounter that situation, they'll be able to kind of deliver a response without that hesitation or that period where they're pausing and they're not sure how to respond.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to focus on the executive functions of the brain, which is the front part of the brain, which focus on attention for detail, organizing, and memory, and shifting. So, for example, being able to put down a task and start another, and to do that in an effective way. So if you assess people on their executive functions, you'll be able to understand how they would organize, how they would plan, what they memorize, because you've given them the tools in a conversation or before, and they've written a plan or they haven't, but that's something that you could assess upon as well.
Wow, I mean,
I was going to say, we've got a few questions in the chat. I also posted in the chat, just as a reminder, could you ask questions in the Ask a Question section so they don't get missed? But just the ones that have been posted on here, we'll just go through them quickly. So Chad asked, how important is it to ask the same questions in order to mark candidates consistently?
I think it's definitely important, but I think people can outsmarten it because they'll understand if you will ask the same question over and over again to assess if there is consistency. And when you're looking for A players, I hate the word, or like high performance, they will understand the actual goal and where they need to be. So people will definitely outsmart their process. I don't think it's that important. I would rather take them off track. Yeah.
Stefan asked, do you have any advice on how to interview people that naturally don't interview well? It's a great question.
Yeah. So this is very interesting. I tend to always create a relationship with my candidates. It's sometimes a bit too much. Sometimes people still text me after I rejected them like ages ago, like, how are you? They're keen to chat, but I think building that relationship in the beginning of the conversation and showing actual like interest in the person, not just asking because you need to interview them. Like, how are you? How was your day? Let's go on. What are your hard skills? What are job requirements? What are our company's USPs? No, it's all about building that connection. So I would focus on, for example, an element in their CV that I have a similar interest in. It could be Python, it could be a language, it could be sports. It's a very easy tip. And then start like, dude, I saw that you have an interest in hockey, field hockey. Well, I play field hockey. Why do you do that? Like, break the ice. Give them the time for them to be comfortable, but then also assess at the same time. So it's finding the balance between being formal and informal, but doing it a more positive way.
Can I just say on that point, this means it makes sense to put one line in your CV to declare your interest.
Exactly.
Because it gives the recruiter something to go on. And I know we see a lot of advice saying, get rid of your interest, no one's interested. So listen, the real estate you're taking up for that one line is so small, but the potential gain is so much. You can tell this person that you're interested in fly fishing, and guess what? That's a potential icebreaker for the recruiter. Or the hiring manager, and even if they don't care, they might use that in order, as you suggested, Charlotte, to build that relationship, that rapport, because without that rapport, you can't actually get good information. I mean, maybe that's the first thing we need to think about as well. Like, how do we break down that barrier, drop the shield so that we can actually have dialogue?
And Hang, I also think taking that into account, I think we also spoke about people being comfortable. So I'm Dutch, and it's not always a good thing to be direct. But I will say, like, you seem a bit uncomfortable. Is there anything that I can make you feel more comfortable? Or is there anything that I could do? And that person would be like, I'm sweating and I don't know what to do and I'm stuttering. I'm like, it's fine. Let's just talk about something else for 5 minutes. And then we'll slowly get into the basics and the formal part of the conversation.
So that's actually a really good bit of EQ there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like sensitivity to how comfortable the other person is. And it's your job as the recruiter or hiring manager or whoever it is you've invited this person in to have a chat with you, your job to put them at ease. Because if they're not at ease, then they're not going to be able to give you the information that you're looking for. And you've got to have techniques to do that. And one of the techniques you suggested, Charlotte, is actually to directly address the fact that the person, you've observed that the person may not be that comfortable. Is that the case? And if so, how can I help you get more comfortable?
It's very simple, because eventually you want that person to success and you will find out whether this person is the right fit or not. So why not, invest 5 minutes of your and his time or her time to make it like more positive outcome, a better candidate experience. And also so that they go back again from a commercial perspective, saying like, I had an interview And for the first time, I had a genuine conversation and the person was interested in me rather than, just ticking off the boxes.
Yep.
Let's talk about fit for a second, because you just said about, assessing somebody's fit. Do you think it's our job as recruiters, if our customer or our internal customer is telling us they want somebody that's outgoing and talkative and, these different things, and you interview somebody who could do the job brilliantly, but is nothing like that, do you think it's our job to tell the hiring manager that they need to change their decisions?
Yeah, it's 100% our job. I think, people always say like, I want this or I want that. And I was like, if you look at the balance in your team and if you put all the characters in place and if you look at what people are good at, you need to find the right balance. So you could want a chatterbox who's very direct like me, but maybe you need someone more introverted and who's, focuses on different, skills that he has or she has. It's an entirely different approach. And I think 100% we need to assess that and we need to push back to the hiring managers, because otherwise they won't say yes or thumbs up to a candidate because in their minds they have someone, but practically there's no one existing like that or not the right fit for the team.
Yeah, I love the director and confidence in your answer, Charlotte. And actually, I agree with you. Even though, in fact, you've convinced me by how direct you were in responding to that, how emphatic you were. Because I was thinking, just do what the hiring manager says. You know what? If the hiring manager tells me you want this personality, I'm going to go and get him. That's my job. But actually, no. What you've got to do is be the advisor to this person. Position yourself to the point where you're consulting them as to the right person for the role. You're not just taking their order because they may not know. It's like they're not the expert at this. The recruiter is. So
recruiters, and I think also like the recruiter is, well, in most cases, the first one who talks to them. So I think it's a first assessment. You'll know eventually when this person's going to be hired. That gut feeling that you have, despite the fact you haven't assessed anything, Adam, what you were talking about. The first second a person comes in, you know directly whether it's going to be, someone that you want to hire or not, which is a weird thing. It's a gut feeling. But basically, if you look at it from a psychological perspective, we need 2 seconds for a person entering the room for having made up our mind, because we're judgmental and not very, very biased. But that's the case. And that's an interesting perspective that you still need to continue, on that gut feeling, whether this person's going to be the right fit or not. But you instantly have that gut feeling, which is very important, having the ability to interview and to hire, but still remain objective in your viewing.
We've got a few more questions that I think we should probably just dwell on quickly, because they're relating to things that we've just been talking about recently. So just back to that, looking for people, looking for on somebody's CV, what kind of interests do they have, and then using that to break the ice at the beginning. Michael's asked, what if they don't have any similar interests to you? I assume that you need to sort of, you use the probe them. Yeah.
If it's like, sometimes I see martial arts, and I'm like, that's cool. Like, why are you doing that? Just try to create an interest. If you don't know something that's written on the CV, just ask about it. Also, I think a key aspect is being vulnerable in conversation, also as a recruiter, saying like, I have no idea what it is. I didn't have the time to look it up, but can you explain more about it? Because then you also heard like the passionate side from that candidate, because that person is absolutely dedicated in order to execute upon whatever martial arts, it could be anything, or a certain coding language that, we are not aware of. But you can learn so much from the individual on the other side of the table that you get to, basically you're interviewing him. He's also consulting you with regards to what you don't know.
Yeah, that's amazing. And on that note, before you continue, Adam, I just want to jump onto this vulnerability concept. Yeah. So I think it's also really important. One of the best ways to get someone to open up to you is actually to show that you're vulnerable. Yeah. And I know recruiters, especially on agency side, we often are trained to come in to be like so tough, so hard. We're the guy or the girl making these, yes or no decisions, Roman Emperor style, live or die to this candidate. We've got to get over ourselves there. We have to show vulnerability, especially when we don't know something. And by the way, a person who's really good at doing this is actually a broadcaster, Louis Theroux. If you want to look at someone who really is a spectacularly good, understated and vulnerable interviewer, Louis Theroux has got the way to do it. Like, he found a way to actually infiltrate really kind of deviant and niche subcultures. Being the type of guy who he is incredible how he can get in there, but he can establish that trust because of his vulnerability and his lack of judgment when he encounters these people. I mean, I'll never forget that episode he did with the overage swinger community, for instance, in Florida. Like, how you get in there? Not that you want to do that, but that's kind of a place where you'd imagine you might be quite defensive. But yeah, you got in there. Anyway,
Jimmy Savile was the other one. Just remarkable. Absolutely. Actually made him feel like they were kind of friends.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that's one thing in addition to that. Like, if you are vulnerable and if you're building that relationship and also telling insights about yourself, you create a relationship, you get rid of all like the hesitations from the candidate's perspective, on company fit, culture fit, because you have the connection that they feel they're able to ask those questions. I'm concerned about this. I'm concerned about that. I don't think I'm able to do that. But they will ask it because you've established that relationship. If you wouldn't have established that relationship, they wouldn't ask you, and you end up at the offer stage, and then they say, well, I have like 50 concerns, but I didn't want to raise it. But now I'm gonna act upon it. You can, exclude all those concerns, also those hesitations before that by becoming a friend in another way.
I want to jump in, Adam, if you don't mind, because Jakob has actually asked a really interesting question, which is directly related to this point. And I think if I understand you correctly, Jakob, what you're saying, if I can just paraphrase, is that, okay, you're the expert recruiter and interviewer. You've made this candidate feel comfortable, therefore you've had a good interview. What happens, though, when you then pass that candidate to the hiring manager who doesn't have your skill set to make the candidate comfortable, and the hiring manager comes out and says that interview is terrible, this person can't communicate? What do you do there? That is a circumstance that might happen, right?
It's an interesting. So it's kind of new, but the thing that we implemented is a heads up scorecard. So basically, you do heads up, and the person the hiring manager or the other interviewers need to assess it, need to look at it, and this could be because someone's grandma died, or it could be that he has autism. It could be that this person has difficulties with that. The heads up card is like stating the bullet points that are important for him to be successful in the second stage. So there are, those are behavioral observations that have been made or have been told towards me, and the hiring manager needs to include those in their judgment. It's a heads up scorecard. Very easy to implement.
Yeah, exactly. We just need a tool, don't we? Excellent. Okay, Adam, you had a few more questions, I think?
Yeah, there's a couple of absolutely brilliant questions in here. So, where did it go? You've just moved it.
I've just answered it.
Gary, Now, Gary's asked, what percentage of recruiters see candidates as humans seeking work versus bags of money? And he says that you think that feeds into around the kind of mindset and rapport building and all that sort of thing. And I've got to be honest, when I was a recruitment consultant, I spent 0 minutes with anybody that wasn't going to make me money.
Yeah.
So, interesting question. What do you think about that?
It's interesting because I started my career off at Robert Walter, so I've been an agency recruiter as well. And I had a couple of one-on-one matches. So I sent one CV and that person was the one. And I knew up front why, because I interacted with the person so much that I got to know that person so well and I knew the company so well. And everyone was like, no, you need to send 20 CVs and you need to spec CVs this and that and have so many calls and you can't do that. It's like, I can, because I know the person and I know the company. And in order to do that, you need to understand how the individual is, what he is, what he or she is capable of.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different technique. I think Gary's kind of he's kind of put the entire industry in a little bit of a vice. The truth is, the truth is, we don't look after job seekers. I mean, that's the reality of recruitment agency. I didn't know that as a candidate. I thought exactly a recruitment consultant would help me get a job. That was probably the biggest misnomer ever. The one lesson that if any job seeker can take away is that agent is not there to get you a job. He's there to fill the job with a candidate. And that's not clearly communicated by anybody. We just need to grasp that. Everyone needs to grasp that. Okay, let's keep going with these questions. They're excellent.
So there's another good. Nadia asked. Okay, so we are going back a little bit, but we kind of can't not because there's such a such an important subject. This, when Nadia said that when she starts an interview, she always sets an example by kind of doing an introduction, a sort of soft introduction, a bit about me, and then the candidate sometimes goes on straight on to, well, okay, and then basically reads through their CV and starts talking about their technical expertise. How do you get somebody back to, yeah, no, hold on a second. Before that, what about you as a person? How do you bring that all back?
I think it's very, very easy solution to it. It's basically state an agenda, but also explain what you find important in an interview. So, for example, the company where I work at, Luno, is super focused on, getting the right employees that have the right mindset and the right culture fit. So we're super focused on who are you as a person. We want people that are genuine. So I always start the conversation like, I care about you and I care about what you do. So let's start off with that first and then go into like the other details. I think just set the agenda, but also come across as genuine, very important. That will be my tip.
I just wanted to point something out. So Stephen has said that when he started in recruitment, it would be common for systems to describe candidates as inventory, and Stefan has said that some ATSs describe candidates as items.
Interesting.
Yeah, really human focused there.
Really human.
On that, I don't actually have a problem with it, because the reality of that process isn't going to be helped by renaming it. I mean, that is the industry we're in. I mean, it's we can't just put a cosmetic paint job on it and say, oh, we rename everything, it's going to be fine. I think that's the reality of pipelining people, which is again a mechanized way to treat human beings. We do need to find another way. I guess what I'm trying to say is that a cosmetic change isn't where we need to go.
I don't agree with that at all. I think that products should be designed in a way to change behaviors for the better, and not, I don't mean for the better just from some kind of be nice to people way, but you're clearly going to provide a better service if you're calling people rather than calling them inventory. So I think product design is actually really important.
All right, you're right. Actually, I changed my mind. I stand corrected.
That said, when you're doing talent attraction, I think when you're doing talent attraction and you're automating it, you shouldn't be thinking of all this sort of, we've got to do 1 hour interviews with everybody that looks at us. That's a total waste of time. You got to think about it as clicks and data right up until the point where you've decided, I want to see that person, and that's where the human needs to start.
Let's move this to another point, because we also talk about how to become a great interviewer. So you got a lot of people watching this and thinking, you know what, I want to get better at my job. We've learned a few frameworks, a few techniques, or whatever. But what are the things, like what's the journey that they need to make to become a really top class interviewer, able to get the person to tell you the most important information for you to then match that person to the job?
Good question. I think I think a person will only tell when you have built a relationship. So that's the first thing you need to be doing, because that person will, be honest also about insecurities or weaknesses and open up about that. If you haven't established that relationship, that person will feel attacked, will probably not tell you. I think I told you the example that I love to ask is basically to ask the person, what do you love in your work? Like, what do you love most? And then after that answer, say, what are you best at work? And is that aligned? And most of the times it's not complete, it's totally not aligned. So I think that also triggers a self-awareness with the candidate, being like, oh, I just said like I love this, but I'm really good at this. Like why does this person want this job, which is a combination of both? We want people to be passionate about what they're doing, but they're actually really good at something else, or maybe at the same thing. And that's how you assess people, being truly motivated, but also from a retention perspective, remain happy and positive and motivated in a role.
You know what? You've also uncovered another technique that I want to just touch on as well, which is you start with a positive. Like, you start with something
always
that you can come out and say something positive with. Yeah. Because that gives you, if you like, the clay to mold with. That's the sort of comfortable place where this person is happy to and comfortable in. That's where you want to go. You don't want to drag the person out of the depth just yet.
And I think it's like when you see people smile and they're so happy to tell about the thing that they love, it shows a really human side, which makes the conversation so much easier and like natural flowing, and it becomes a conversation rather than like an interview from one side. I think that's so important. Stick to questions like, what are you most proud of? When you think of like anything in your life, I also say work related and not work related. What's your biggest achievement? Tell me more about that, because then you get more personal insights, also from a more informal perspective, how people deal with certain things in their lives and how they adapted that in their work style. So it's very easy to make that boundary, to scoop over like, okay, but in your personal life, okay, how did you do this? You have 6 children and you're being a CEO. How the hell do you do that? It's just creating that context, but also showing again that you have genuine interest in a person, because that person has achieved, and some people have achieved things differently than others. So not being biased and just ask about like what you see on their CV and what you notice during interaction with them, you will get so much information, basically all the information that you need.
Charlotte, Nicholas has made a very, very interesting point or question, which is that he says he always starts interviews with asking the candidates to choose from an image from a pile of images that he carries around with him.
Love
and
it.
Introduce themselves using that image and maybe use it during the interview. Any other techniques that are similar that you'd like to suggest?
I think any objects that you can see in the backgrounds of people, it's very easy. Just say like, oh, I see you have, Adam, you have, I don't even know, the dictionaries, or like, I see all those things, objects in the back. Tell me about it. What's about that? It's easy to just observe what's a personal interest. Someone has purple hair, so like, oh, you have purple hair. It's something I would be, I wouldn't dare to do. How did you dare to do that? And then the person probably tells like, yeah, I love this because I love this type of music, or I love to be this way. Why do you love to be this way? And then you keep the conversation flowing. So just pick the things that are right in front of you, either from a CV, from a video camera perspective. I sometimes talk, we have this, this pillow, this fluffy pillow created from a branding perspective. So like, what do you think of this? And I hold it in front of them because I hate it. And then they'll say like, well, and then I say, I hate it. And he started a conversation around that. Just be creative, but also it's right in front of you. It doesn't always need to be carried with you.
You know what? I'm going to address
that's my personal diaries, by the way.
I knew it.
The Magnus Opus he's never read a single word in those pages. They're just there for display. No, but on Nicholas's point, I mean, I actually looked at that and I thought, you know what? That sounds like a kind of a break the ice technique in a bar that you might use, never mind in an office in an interview. But it actually leads to a concept called having a conversation in a neutral space. Because oftentimes when you're having a first contact scenario, it's very difficult to go straightly into the other person's space. It can be quite intrusive, let's say, for people who are defensive or they're introverted, they don't want to share this type of stuff. Coming in too soon could be a little bit too much. And on the other side, if you end up just talking about yourself, that's ultimately the boring thing to do. So you have a conversation on a neutral topic that you can both share, which in Nicholas's case would be, hey, let's just check out these images, or carry some dice around or something, and have a gimmick that will help you generate a neutral space to have that chat.
Definitely. I think you need to adjust it to the types of person that you talk to, that you're hired for. You certainly need to adjust that.
Okay, cool. Well, listen, I think we're running out of time. Adam, you're going to say one more thing? Yeah, I do. I want to ask just one more question, Charlotte. You talked earlier in the interview, you talked about resiliency. Resiliency? Yeah. You mentioned that a couple of times. In the context, I think, of leadership interviewing, probably.
Yeah.
Is this something that you think the leaders need resilience?
100%. They are leaders. They deal with probably a team, maybe a big team, maybe a small team, which includes all different types of characters, which all have different behaviors, different environments, different experiences, and they need to be able to coach them and guide them in the way, but also achieving their own goals in the same way. So I think in order, to, for example, within the crypto industry, how fluctuating it is, how difficult it is. also from a legal perspective, so you need to keep on pushing and stepping over the burden and being able to move on with a positive insight. I think that's such a key element that leadership needs to, you can't just break. You can't break. You have a whole team. You have a massive goal to achieve. So you need to be on top of your game. Yeah,
definitely. The concept of anti-fragility is one that I think is important. And certainly venture capitalists look for this when they're 100%. Assessing who to invest in, because they don't want, the first time that you've got a big problem in your life, they don't want it to happen when they've just given you €1 million. They want you to have dealt with things in the past. So, yeah.
I'm interested in this, but is it a way you can test it for young people? Because I do get it. If you're, I just think over time you'll end up accumulating stories you could relate that might demonstrate resiliency, and as you get older, you might get better at this. But that's not to say that's the case. A young person without a massive kind of backlog of events in her life could still be super resilient. Like, how is there a way we can actually uncover that? Or maybe is interviewing, an inadequate tool to do that?
I think there's like an objective way to ask, to wanting to have that outcome, but then directly asking how many challenges or, what are the biggest challenges you had to overcome in your life, which is also like quite a heavy topic. But I sometimes ask later on in the conversation, I ask, why are you the person you are now? What's created you as a human being? What do you stand for? And I think this is built upon the personal experiences, your own persona that you have created, and maybe you haven't, but you also then realize during the interview, the person is not there in being them yet. Does it make any sense?
It makes perfect sense. And with that, we have to bring it to a close, folks, because we're out of time. Charlotte, you need to tell me actually, how do I pronounce your second name? Because I need to get this right. I look at it, it intimidates the hell out of me. So Charlotte
Mutsaerts. Yeah, my dad says Mozart because it's easier, but I think it's a bit better.
Well, listen, Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us on Brainfood Live. It's been wonderful having you. We'll definitely have you back on the show on another topic. Thank you, everyone, for watching on Crowdcast, LinkedIn Live, Facebook, and Periscope. Been awesome having you. We'll be back next week with another show. We're talking about diversifying your talent pipeline, and we're going to look at all the different ways you can do that, from writing adverts, from interviewing, from sourcing, all the rest of it. We've got some wonderful guests on the show there as well. Final shout out to our sponsors this week, CVCheck. They are a background checking organization. Yes, you're going to interview well, but you know what? You're also going to have to validate and check these people as well. Check out CVCheck.com. They're the business that might sort you out for that. All right, that's about it, everyone. Thank you for joining. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.